Let me ask you something, and I want you to sit with this question. Really sit with it. When was the last time you truly learned something? Not scrolled past it, not bookmarked it, not watched a 45-second video about it and told yourself you understood it. I mean, learned it. In your bones, in your muscle, in the quiet confidence of a man who no longer needs to prove what he knows because he simply is what he knows. See, we are living in the most information-rich era in the history of human civilization. Right now, in your pocket, you carry more knowledge than every library of the ancient world combined. And yet, and here is the painful irony, gentlemen, we are producing fewer masters than ever before. We have more access and less depth, more content and less competence, more noise and less wisdom. We are drinking from a fire hose and wondering why we're still thirsty. I have spent decades studying what separates the men who dabble from the men who dominate. What separates the ones who know about something from the ones who become something. And every single time, without exception, the answer traces back not to a Silicon Valley algorithm, not to a productivity app, not to some modern framework built in a boardroom. It traces back to something far older, something forged in the dojos of feudal Japan, refined over centuries by samurai, swordsmiths, poets, and tea masters. Something so elegant in its simplicity that most people walk right past it. Because the greatest truths rarely announce themselves. It is called Shuhari. 3 syllables, 3 stages, one philosophy that will change the way you learn, the way you lead, and the way you live. If you have the courage to honor it. Because here is what I know after all these years of studying greatness up close. The men who changed the world were not the ones who learned the fastest. They were the ones who learned the deepest. They were the ones who understood that mastery is not a sprint. It is a pilgrimage. And every pilgrimage begins with a single, humbling, non-negotiable step. You have to be willing to be a beginner, not just call yourself one, not just wear the label with false modesty. I mean genuinely, completely, radically surrender to the process of learning from someone who knows more than you. Because the ancient Japanese masters understood something that our ego-driven highlight reel culture desperately tries to deny. That before you can ever break the rules, you must first obey them so completely that they become a part of your very breathing. Before you transcend, you must first submit. And that, my friends, is where the magic begins. So today, I am not here to give you another tip. I am not here to give you a checklist. I am here to give you a philosophy, a way of seeing the learning process that will make everything you have ever tried to master suddenly make sense. A framework so ancient it has outlived empires, and so relevant it applies to everything, from mastering a business to reinventing yourself after life knocks you flat on your back. Welcome to Shuhari. Welcome to the ancient Japanese secret to learning anything. 10 times faster, 10 times deeper, and in a way that lasts a lifetime. We live in a world that has fallen in love with the idea of speed. Everything around us has been engineered to be faster, easier, more instant. Your food arrives in 30 minutes. Your entertainment loads in 3 seconds. Your news is condensed into a headline. And your education, the very foundation upon which your potential is built, has been reduced to a 5-minute YouTube video and a thread of bullet points that you scroll past while you're sitting in traffic. And we call this learning. But here is the truth that nobody in the productivity industry wants to admit, because it does not sell courses and it does not go viral. We are the most informed generation in human history, and simultaneously, one of the least capable of genuine mastery. We know a little about everything and everything about nothing. We have confused familiarity with understanding. We have mistaken recognition for retention. We have convinced ourselves that because we have been exposed to something, we have actually learned it. And that is one of the most dangerous illusions a man can carry. Think about how many books you have read or started. Think about how many seminars you have attended, how many podcasts you have consumed, how many online courses you purchased with full intention and never finished. Now ask yourself honestly, how much of that has actually changed your behavior? How much of it has transferred from your mind into your hands, into your habits, into the way you show up every single day? Because information that does not transform you is simply entertainment wearing a serious face. The modern learning culture has sold us a fantasy. It has told us that learning should feel effortless, that if something is difficult, the method must be wrong, that struggle is a sign of inefficiency rather than a sign of growth. So we hop from method to method, tool to tool, guru to guru, always searching for the shortcut, always abandoning the process the moment it demands something real from us. We have become addicted to the beginning of things, to that initial rush of novelty, and terrified of the middle, where the real transformation actually lives. And the cost of this illusion is staggering. Careers built on surface-level knowledge that crumbles under real pressure, relationships navigated with half-understood advice, leaders making decisions with borrowed wisdom they never truly earned, men walking through life feeling perpetually behind, perpetually overwhelmed, and quietly wondering why, despite consuming so much, they still feel so empty. The problem was never the amount of information available to you. The problem is that we have forgotten what it actually means to learn something all the way through. Long before the modern world began packaging wisdom into weekend workshops and online masterclasses, the Japanese had already solved the riddle of mastery. They did not solve it with technology. They did not solve it with speed. They solved it with something far more powerful, far more patient, and far more demanding than anything our current culture is willing to offer. They solved it with a philosophy. A living, breathing, battle-tested philosophy that was forged not in classrooms, but in dojos, not in theory, but in blood, sweat, and decades of deliberate practice. That philosophy is called Shuhari. It comes from the world of Japanese martial arts, most notably from Aikido, and it was articulated by one of the great masters of that tradition. But do not let its origins fool you into thinking this is merely about combat or swordsmanship. The Japanese have always understood something that the Western world is only beginning to rediscover: that the principles governing the mastery of one discipline are the same principles governing the mastery of all disciplines. Whether you are learning to lead a company, raise a child, build a craft, or rebuild yourself from the ground up, the path of true mastery follows the same ancient architecture. Shuhari is composed of 3 kanji characters, 3 stages that every true learner must pass through. Not skip, not rush, not reorder, but pass through with full presence and full commitment. The first is Shu, which means to follow, to obey, to protect the rules. The second is Ha, which means to break, to detach, to begin questioning. And the third is Ri, which means to transcend, to separate, to become something beyond the rules entirely. 3 words, 3 worlds. And between each of them, a transformation so complete that the person who enters each stage barely resembles the person who exits it. What makes Shuhari so profound is not just what it teaches you to do, it is what it teaches you to trust. It teaches you to trust the process even when you cannot yet see the destination. It teaches you that the stage you are in right now, no matter how frustrating or unglamorous it may feel, is not a waiting room. It is the work itself. It teaches you that mastery is not a moment of arrival. It is a series of complete surrenders, each one deeper and more demanding than the last. And here is what separates Shuhari from every modern learning hack you have ever encountered. It does not promise you comfort. It does not promise you convenience. It promises you something far more valuable, something that no algorithm can manufacture and no shortcut can replicate. If there is one stage of Shuhari that our modern culture has declared war on, it is the first one, Shu, the stage of following, the stage of obedience, the stage where you walk into the room, set your opinions at the door, and submit yourself completely to the wisdom of someone who has already walked the road you are trying to travel. And I understand why it makes people uncomfortable. I genuinely do. Because we live in an era that has romanticized the self-made man, the disruptor, the one who threw away the rulebook and did it his own way. We have been told since we were young that the greatest sign of intelligence is the ability to think for yourself. And so the idea of deliberately choosing to follow, to obey, to not question, it feels like regression. It feels like everything we have been conditioned to reject. But here is what the Japanese masters understood that we have forgotten. Obedience at the right moment, in the right context, under the right guidance, is not the opposite of greatness. It is the foundation of it. Think about every master you have ever admired, every elite performer, every world-class craftsman, every leader whose competence commands a room without uttering a single word. If you trace their journey back far enough, you will find a period, sometimes years, sometimes decades, where they did nothing but follow, where they asked no questions about why, where they simply did what they were shown, exactly as they were shown it, over and over and over again, until it stopped being an action and became an instinct, until the technique stopped living in their mind and started living in their hands, in their body, in their very nature. This is what Shu demands of you. Not blind, mindless compliance, but the disciplined, ego-surrendered commitment to absorbing a proven system before you dare to alter it. Because you cannot break rules you do not fully understand. You cannot innovate from a foundation you never truly built. The man who skips Shu and jumps straight to originality is not a pioneer. He is a man building a skyscraper on sand and calling himself an architect. The greatest enemy of Shu is not laziness. Laziness is obvious and easy to confront. The greatest enemy of Shu is ego. It is that quiet internal voice that whispers, "You already know enough to do this your own way." It is the impatience that disguises itself as confidence. It is the arrogance that masquerades as creativity. And it is that voice, unchecked and unopposed, that has quietly stolen the potential from more talented men than failure ever could. True learning begins the moment you become humble enough to be taught completely. There comes a moment in every genuine learner's journey, and if you have ever truly committed yourself to mastering anything, you will recognize this moment, where something shifts, where the rules that once felt like a lifeline begin to feel like a limitation, where the structure that once gave you everything you needed starts to feel like a ceiling rather than a floor, where you find yourself almost involuntarily asking a question you were never supposed to ask in the stage before this one. Why? Not out of defiance, not out of arrogance, but out of a deep, earned, experience-backed curiosity that can only be born from someone who has truly paid their dues in the stage of Shu. This is the stage of Ha, and it is the most misunderstood stage of the entire Shuhari journey, because when most people hear the word break, they think destruction. They think of the young man who never learned the rules throwing them away simply because following felt uncomfortable. But that is not Ha, that is just impatience wearing the costume of courage. True Ha is something entirely different. True Ha is what happens when a man has so completely internalized the foundation beneath him that he can now, with surgical precision and genuine understanding, begin to test its edges. Begin to question not because he doubts the master, but because he has finally developed enough mastery of his own to engage with the material at a higher level. Ha is where personalization is born. It is where the student begins the long, sacred process of becoming himself within the discipline, rather than simply a reflection of it. It is where you take everything the Shu stage deposited into you and you begin to turn it over in your hands, examine it under your own light, adapt it to your own context, your own strengths, your own vision of what this craft can become in your particular hands. And this is not a betrayal of your teacher. Done with integrity and genuine competence, it is the highest form of respect, because it means their foundation was strong enough to build something new upon. But here is what makes Ha so demanding, and why so many people either rush into it too early or never enter it at all. It requires you to hold two things simultaneously: deep respect for what was given to you, and the intellectual courage to evolve beyond it. Too much reverence, and you stay frozen in Shu forever, a perfect imitator who never becomes an original. Too much boldness without foundation, and you shatter into chaos, mistaking noise for innovation and confusion for creativity. Breaking is not rebellion. Breaking is the inevitable, beautiful consequence of a foundation so solid it earns you the right to grow. There is a moment that every true master speaks about, and almost none of them can fully explain it in words. Not because they are being secretive, not because they are withholding, but because what happens at this final stage of the Shuhari journey exists in a territory that language was simply not built to contain. It is the moment when everything you have learned, every rule you followed in Shu, every boundary you tested in Ha, every adaptation you made, every uncomfortable question you asked, every late night you spent in disciplined repetition, all of it suddenly stops being something you do and becomes something you simply are. This is Re, and it is the most breathtaking destination a learner can reach. But I need to correct something right now, because the word destination is already misleading you. Because Re is not a place you arrive at and unpack your bags. It is not a certificate you hang on a wall or a title you add to your biography. Re is a state of being. It is the point at which the technique has so completely dissolved into the person that you can no longer separate the two. The master calligrapher does not think about brushstrokes. The master leader does not think about influence. They simply move, and mastery moves with them, effortlessly, instinctively, invisibly. This is what the Japanese meant when they said that at the stage of Re, the practitioner separates from the rules entirely, not because the rules no longer matter, but because the rules have been so deeply absorbed that they operate beneath consciousness. They have graduated from the mind into the marrow, and from that place, something extraordinary becomes possible. True originality, not the manufactured originality of someone trying to be different, but the effortless, inevitable originality of someone who has become so completely themselves within a discipline that everything they produce carries an unrepeatable signature. Re also carries with it a profound responsibility that most conversations about mastery conveniently ignore. Because when you reach this stage, you are no longer just a practitioner. You become a source. You become the kind of person that others begin their shoe beneath. You become the keeper of a standard, the living embodiment of what the discipline can produce when someone honors it completely. And that is not a burden to carry lightly. That is a sacred obligation to carry with humility, because you of all people know exactly what it cost to get here. Transcendence was never the finish line. Transcendence is simply the moment you finally realize that you and the mastery you pursued have become one and the same thing.